All right, everybody, here it is. Finally done. My 1977 Ironhead. I dropped it off about a year ago to Gary at Ironhead Cycle in Justin, Texas. And he's got it done. It wasn't necessarily his fault it took this long. It kind of got ripped off on the new Springer front end, which I'm sure if you watch his channel, you've seen his public service announcement that he put out a couple days ago. Anyway, here's the finished product. It didn't look like this when I dropped it off. It was pretty much stock. I mean, it had some custom things that have been added over the years, but I rode it for about 2 weeks and it broke down on me, and I flirted with the idea of trying to rebuild it myself, and I just knew it would take too long, so I found Gary and contacted him, and he said, yeah, bring it on down. So we brought it down to him, and here's what he did. New Paughco frame, Paughco Springer front end, satin black. Put my original brake caliper on there, rebuilt it, made it work. We switched out to a 21-inch front wheel. He completely went through the engine, rebuilt the top end, hardened valve seats, you name it. Took care of it, powder coated a lot of the engine. It's going to be kind of a rat rod, so we just left all the tin bare. I'm going to let it rust, see how it looks. I originally wanted a suicide shift, but thankfully Gary talked me out of that, since I want it to be my everyday ride. Gave him some ideas about using the drive chain for a sissy bar, and he just kind of ran with it. This is what we got. Fucking awesome, isn't it? Got the sprocket welded in there for my tail light. Used the chain on the pipes. And my kicker pedal made out of drive chain. I picked it up 4 or 5 days ago, and I've put about 300 miles on it so far, so we're getting her broke in. That's why it's a little dirty. Anyway, there it is. If you guys want a badass custom motorcycle built or need any engine work done, Gary, Ironhead Cycles, Justin, Texas. Look him up. Does awesome work. Great guy. Working on my kid's bike right now, and we're kind of stuck down here in Texas, so he even invited us over for drinks and barbecue last Saturday. Great guy. Him and his wife Peg, both awesome. Doesn't let anything leave his shop unless he's 100% behind it. Great attention to detail. I can't say enough good things about him. I love it. Been dreaming about this bike for a long time. Thank you, Gary. I couldn't have asked for more, dude. Appreciate it. Yeah. Just in case you're wondering how easy it is to start. First kick every time.
This is a little bit of the sissy bar design and fabrication process. I had a couple dimensions I had to hit. You know, I could have winged it and done it by eye, but you know, you screw something up, you waste a lot of material. You really don't want to do that. So just take some paper together, drew it out where it needed to be. I needed to hit this dimension widthwise and this dimension height-wise. I wanted two sides that were straight and parallel. This is where the bar is going to attach to the fender, so I needed to hit this dimension. This dimension down here was a little less critical, but you know, I measured it, came up with some numbers, and bent the steel to match. And you saw me bend other sissy bars, or at least one other one, so I'm not going to go into that. And fabricated the parts, welded the two legs together, and ended up where we are right now. The side plates were a template made out of cardboard. Just experimented with it until I got a shape I needed. All right, so here's kind of the moment of truth of this project is welding the chain on here. And that takes care of that. I like that. Well, what I like doesn't matter. The guy who's paying for it and owns the bike wanted it, so he's got it. Interesting project. Men, as this project blazes to its inevitable conclusion, it's time to take a look at this thing again. If you've got a sissy bar made out of drive chain, then obviously you have to have a taillight made out of a drive sprocket. Here is said drive sprocket. It's got a couple holes drilled in it already, which I drilled for this taillight lens. This is a standard Harley turn signal lens. Obviously, it's a taillight. It's going to have a red one. I got a new one. This is just to lay out the screw pattern. FYI, this thing was hard, really hard. Now, I happen to have a female companion with me today in the shop. She wants to stay out of view, and I would normally go into how hard this thing is, but she has no idea how crude I could be. So we're just going to skip over that and suffice it to say that this is hard, or was hard. What I had to do to drill these holes is I took this whole thing, heated it up red hot, threw it in the bottom of the sand in my sandblast cabinet to let it cool off slowly, thereby annealing it. After I annealed it, I was able to drill holes for the taillight. So what we've got left to do with that is we got to locate the holes for the taillight bulb. All right, this is what we're going to make. The cover for the back side of this taillight out of. Yeah, it's an order of about 1,000 times the magnitude it needs to be, but it's the only thing I got laying around that is about the right size. That's pretty round, huh? All right, if I fuck this up, this is going to be hard to undo. So just a little sanity check. The sissy bar forward direction faces that way. So this is the back. The back side of the taillight is facing the correct way because the light bulb will stick out through this spigot on here. I got some washers stacked up underneath this thing to get it to just the right height. I want it centered widthwise between the sissy bar rails. I got just barely enough argon left to get a tack or two on each side. So I'm going to try to get it tacked in place, verify it's facing the right direction. This bar is the bar that I used to control the bends of the 3/8 inch steel that I made this sissy bar out of. So, and I did this because this is the same width as the fender. So this thing is tapered. I could drive it forward or I could drive it back, and I could affect the width between the side plates, which is, you know, critical within 1/8 of an inch probably, so that it'll fit the fender nicely without stressing or forcing anything. So I got it where I want it. Let's turn the torch on, put the gloves on, and try to get it tacked in place. That's good. This thing ain't going nowhere. I'm going to take the clamps off, get as much welding done as I could get done until I run out of gas. Hopefully I'll get it all done and I could call this done. Cool. Let's see if it fits on the bike. Hi, Tim. This shot's for you. I don't know, pretty cool. I like it. I think it worked out okay. Rat rod enough for you? Hey, we're going to talk about this fender just briefly and the motorcycle it's going on. Just kind of FYI, when I put a bike together, a custom bike with a custom fender on it, there's a few things that I like to see from a builder's point of view. One of which is I weld nuts on the inside of the fender everywhere where there's a bolt going through. You guys know what it's like. You got to take the fender off for some reason or another. You can't get a wrench in between the tire and the fender to get the nuts off. It's a real pain in the balls. So I like to weld nuts on everywhere there's going to be a bolt going through. That way you could get it off with only using one tool. I like to weld flange nuts on there because the flange nuts have a little bit of a base that make them easier to weld on. The other thing I like to do is to weld doublers in everywhere that the fender is attached. If you welded a nut to the inside of this fender and drove the bike around, it would just crack. You'd have a big hole over there. So I like to double the metal up everywhere there's a nut is going to be welded. And the way I do that, and there's lots of ways to do it, I ain't saying one way is the right way, one way is the wrong way, but I drill holes and I put little rosettes in. Probably the more holes, the better. But anyway, just me, just what I like to do. And the last thing I like to do when I'm getting the fender ready to install is I like there to be a conduit for the taillight wires on the inside. So I usually weld a steel tube in there. You know, not a lot to it. But anyway, let's take a look at the bike. Let's put this fender on, and I want to go over a couple of things of why the bike is like it is. Oh, that's not bad. Didn't even have to use a pry bar or hammer once. I'm liking it. So let's take a minute and talk about why the lines of this bike are the lines of this bike. Design considerations, I guess. You got long, straight shotgun pipes. You want them to be absolutely parallel to each other. And I've got a magnetic degree indicator. So I'll pop that on here, I pop it on here. They're within 1 degree of being exactly parallel. They're also exactly parallel to the bottom frame rail. You probably can't see the bottom frame rail very well when the bike is assembled, but your brain knows it's there. I see a lot of guys with custom bikes, and you know, they get the exhaust all cattywampus on there, and that just drives me absolutely crazy. So goal number 1, get your exhaust pipes on straight, get them parallel to the bottom of the frame, get them parallel to each other. You know, you need to have some structure, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Number 2, design consideration. The angle of the sissy bar. The angle of the sissy bar matches exactly the angle of the center post. When the oil tank is in here and the rest of the bits and pieces are on, this is another thing. You're going to barely be able to see it, but you know what? Your brain knows it's there, and it's looking for structure and organization, cohesiveness in the design. So I try to, keep the structures aligned, parallel to each other, pointing in a direction that makes sense. So what's next on this particular project? I got a seat ordered with a perfectly flat bottom on it, and this frame tube is going to be in the way of installing the seat and getting it to look halfway decent. If I put the seat on top of the frame tube, I'm going to have a lot bigger gap under here than I'd like to see. I like to keep the seat as low as possible. So, call me crazy, but I'm going to get my cutoff wheel. Going to chop this all off right along here. The seat's a foot long. I measured out a foot, that's up to here. So I'm going to cut that all off. Get a piece of 1/8 inch steel. Cut it up and make it match the part that I'm going to cut off, and weld it in so as to keep this area flat. That's next. All right, that little extra bit of cutting and welding, well worth the effort to get the seat to lay down against the frame rails. All right, let's see if we can make this work. Well, that'll work, I think. Yeah, let's go clean it up. Clean it up and weld it. The astute among you will recognize this as being a facsimile of the wraparound oil tank on Sportsters from the early 50s. This is a raw oil tank. I got it from an outfit called Throttle Masters. Yeah, it looks of reasonably decent construction. This is unsponsored. We'll see how this works out, but it looks like it's halfway decent. I could have bought an actual wraparound oil tank, but for several reasons it wouldn't fit this bike without doing a lot of work to it. This was $99. The originals that I see on eBay, people are asking, I don't know what they're getting, but they're asking 250 bucks. And for 250 bucks, you get a dented up piece of fucking crap that's good, that I would need to do a bunch of welding on anyway. So I might as well start with something that's new. So anyway, because it's easier to cut up cardboard, let's design the mounting system. Well, that matches pretty good for a first attempt. Not bad. So this is what we're going to end up with. Let's go back out in the dirty shop, find a chunk of sheet metal, mark it up, cut it and bend it. Let's just trace this piece out, would be the easiest way to do this. I'm going to punch some of the key features. All right, I just traced in my line so I don't lose track where I'm at. We're gonna go out to the dirty shop and take the Makita to it and cut it out. Looking pretty good to me. Let's check a fit. Calibrated eyeball says it looks pretty good. It did take a couple of trips to the big disc sander to fine tune it, but I got it where I want it. Give it a little check, see how I made out. All right, so here's the finished part. I did a little grinding, tweaked the bends a little bit by hand and a device, and I got a real nice fit. And, you know, I'm looking at this oil tank, and the oil tank, well, it's hard to pick up on camera. You see, here's the trouble with this kind of stuff. You might be able to pick it up. Let's get it at just the right angle. You'll notice that the way they built it, this edge is not parallel to this edge. There's a little angle between the two of them. So, you know, once again, this looks fairly well made. You know, it's kind of heavy. I don't know what gauge steel it is for sure. You know, they polished it a little bit. You know, they ground the welds down over here. It looks pretty good. But, you know, in the end, I got to suspect it was made in China. You know, it's just not quite what you'd hope it would be. You know, it'll work. You probably wouldn't notice the, you know, the discrepancy between these surfaces unless you got it out of the bike and you're looking at it like I'm looking at it. You know, and of course I'm trying to get everything to line up. And, you know, I'm looking at the repair part I fabricated or the installation part I fabricated, and I could tell that this is not parallel to this. It is more or less parallel to this side. It's not my part. It's the way the tank was formed. But, you know, what are you going to do? I could make a tank, and I've made tanks, but, you know, this is a customer's bike. At some point, you know, the labor rate times how many hours it takes to make a tank, $99, you know what I mean? The economics of it just prevent making everything by hand unless the particular owner or customer has real deep pockets, and you know, you got to exercise a little discretion there. Money is a factor in all this shit. So anyway, what's the next step? Well, the next step is I have to be able to screw studs in here, so I need a chunk of steel on the back of this, probably a 1/4 inch thick, so that I could weld 4 studs onto it, so that I've got something to screw my saddle clamps down onto. So I'm going to go dig around the junk pile, see what I got out there in the way of steel, and we'll get a piece to weld on the back of there. All right, so there's the rosette holding the steel plate on the back that we're going to be drilling into. So let's punch some holes in this thing and tap it out. And that takes care of that. So the next part of this project is figure out how to line this up, clamp it on, and weld it. Coming up. So here is the installed oil tank. Welding went okay. It fits nicely in there. That's what I was after. Okay, here's the nature of my problem with this thing. The bike has been stagnated for several months now because I need a front end for it. The front end is coming from Paughco. It's supposed to be delivered September 2nd. And the reason I've been stagnated is because, of course, your front end sits up in here and your handlebars are on it. The gas tank is going to be mounted on the top rail. And I need to know where the handlebars in the front end of the gas tank are going to end up so that the handlebars don't hit the gas tank. So I've been waiting until I get the front end, until I drill the holes for mounting the gas tank. This bike is going to have internal fork stops. Those may have to be modified to make sure the handlebars don't swing into the tank. I'm not 100% sure the neck cups I have are going to work without being machined. So I've been stuck over here. Anyway, the bike is mocked up. Pretty much all the little bullshit on it is done. Anyway, over the course of the next, 4 weeks, I'm going to build this thing. I'm going to video it. The owner kind of the owner of this saw the video on the K model, and he kind of wanted me to video his bike going together. So that's what I'm going to do. The owner wanted kind of a rat rod, so he doesn't want the sheet metal bits painted. His idea is that he's going to let them rust to a level that he's happy with, and then he's going to cover them with boiled linseed oil, and hopefully that'll lock in a certain amount of patina. The frame is mocked up. There's some welding, some brackets and stuff I've got to weld onto it, so I'm going to be in a mad rush here. When the front end gets here on the 2nd, I'm going to have to get it mounted, check the clearance on the gas tank, pull the bike apart. I might start pulling a bike apart later on today. I've got everything fit except for the gas tank in the front end. I'm going to pull the bike apart and get the front end fitted as soon as it gets here. Get the frame off to get powder coated. He does want the frame powder coated, and hopefully my powder coat guy who does my big parts, I do all the little stuff, but my powder coat guy, hopefully I'm going to put the squeeze on him and get him to expedite this thing. So let's work on this bitch. This particular owner wanted passenger pegs on this thing. I don't know why. The passenger is going to ride on this once, and being as it's a rigid frame Sportster, they're going to say never fucking again. But hey, the guy wants passenger pegs. We're going to get him some. I've got the passenger pegs bent so they're now parallel to the rear frame down tube. I like to drill the mounting holes in this tab that's sticking out underneath here, but I just can't quite get to them right now, so I'm going to have to wait until the frame is off the block, so to speak, so I can turn it over and drill them up from the bottom. I think it's going to be the easiest way to get in there. Job number 2 for today. This is the battery box, and I had originally intended to bolt it to the back of the starter blanking plate. I decided I didn't like that installation, and I'm now going to machine a bracket to weld to the frame and to bolt the battery box to, so it's going to sit right down in here. This is the part I made yesterday afternoon. The battery box is going to attach to it. I got 2 holes countersunk drilled and tapped. The battery box is dimpled. The battery box is dimpled instead of countersunk, and the dimples will fit into these countersunk holes over here, and this little gem is going to get welded to the frame down under the oil tank. So that's that. Okay, so here is where the battery box is going to go. This is the bracket I made. It's going to get welded to the frame up in here. The battery box is going to get bolted to it once it's welded in, and it's going to set about here. So that's that. I think we're going to start breaking this thing down.
heavy.
This particular owner wanted the rat rod kind of looking thing, so we're gonna scuff up what's left of the chrome on these pipes and give it kind of a satin finish. I got my old friend, the Chinese belt sander out, and I have a bit of advice there. It actually works pretty good for this kind of thing. Okay, here's the neck cups with internal fork stops I'm using, made by my favorite purveyor of imported motorcycle parts. The major part of the system is this thing here, and it has a stop built into it, and the stop engages the slots on this ring. So anyway, this gets pinned to the neck with some little roll pins that are in here. And here is the stop. This gets pinned to the bottom of the triple clamp. And it looks like these might be different lengths. I get a little more travel on this one than I do on this one. Installation looks straightforward enough. I did a little machining on this already. I don't blame V-Twin for that. I got a Paughco frame, so it's kind of hard to mix and match these parts. It should just barely fit a 1-inch stem, and the springer's going to have a 1-inch stem on it. I got a 3/1000 interference fit where this goes into the frame, so I'm going to center this up on the frame, knock it in there, and drill these holes for these little pins. Let's see how that works out. Alright, third time's the charm. Not just for smoking dope. Just a FYI, there's a little lip in there, and the pins I drove in are all set a little below that lip, so the bearing will be able to go and flush up against that lip or that shoulder. In preparation for taking the engine out, I got to take off all these forward control linkages. These linkages came with the bike. I did do some re-engineering. Originally, this brake pedal had an arm that stuck out the bottom, and when you pushed on the brake, it pushed on the rod that went back to the brake activating lever. The trouble with that is you have a relatively thin actuating rod, and if you push on it, the rod is just going to bow up in the middle when you need it most. So I cut the part of the mechanism off of the bottom, re-drilled holes on the top. Now when you step on the brake, you're pulling on everything. You're putting it in tension instead of compression, which is the better way to do it. Unless you've got a really stout brake actuating rod, something like a 1/2 inch or maybe 3/4 of an inch in diameter, a piece of thick wall tubing, you're going to have trouble. Like I say, when you press on these things and you push on this rod, it wants to bow up and just bend in the middle. Not what you want to have happen when you're trying to brake hard. So this is a better arrangement. I'm not quite sure how the feel of it is going to work out. So I've got different holes drilled in here so that you can move this attaching point. You put it up here, you're going to have more leverage on it, but you're going to have to push the pedal farther to get it to do anything. Down here, I think the pedal will be a little bit harder to push, but it won't travel this far. And there's a couple of adjustments on the lever that sticks out of the side of the crankcase over here. And anyway, just FYI, when you're setting up a brake, you want it to pull on the rod, not push on the rod. I don't know what the fuck this thing is for, what they intended it to be for, but whatever, it's got to go. Yes, just fitting some master cylinders and a doorbell ring. Boom. I think there's a front end in there. All right, here's the new Springer. Nicely made. I mean, the finish, the way the tubes are blended to the yoke. My God, this thing is nice. Really nice. One little problem. This is the stop plate for the internal stops on the neck. And it doesn't quite fit flush down in here. And that's because this chamfer on the stem rides up a little bit past this flat area. So I'm going to take this out on the lathe and put a little chamfer down in this corner here so that it'll fit flat on there. Back in a little bit. Let's see if I can get this on the bike without fucking anything up. Well, it's on there. Full beans. It's to stop one way. It's to stop the other way. The purpose of these most recent gyrations is to make sure the gas tank is going to clear the handlebars when they're hard over on the stop. The other consideration was the front end and the wheel. I wasn't sure these things are going to work together or not. This is a Paughco front end, and I believe their published information says that this is this front end was meant for a Evo type Sportster, not an old Ironhead, and definitely not an old Ironhead hub and brake, which is what it's got on it. It looks like everything is going to clear just fine. I've got a couple spaces to make, and not a big deal. Probably going to have to make an axle. Once again, not a big deal. But yeah, nice. I'm really looking forward to riding this thing. This is going to be fun. Unlike the K project where you didn't get to hear it run, you're going to get to hear this one run and drive. So I guess next thing is the gas tank. Wow. And clearance with the handlebars is a little bit of an issue. Had I just guessed this thing way back in the beginning, I'd have been in deep trouble. The tank is going to sit up. You know, I may switch that stop in the front here to the one that gives less travel. Either that or I'm going to have to move the tank back. And I really don't want to move it any farther back than it is. And the tank is going to be up on top of the frame rail about 1/4 of an inch. So, yeah, it looks like the ass end of the tank is going to be right here. Yeah, it gives me about 1/2 inch on each side. That's what you need. Here's the view looking straight up the back tire. I got a tank bung tacked in here and a tank bung tacked in here. I did this 3 or 4 days ago, and this one was off a little bit. I cut the tack weld, I moved it over a little bit, so this one should pretty much be hidden behind this one, at least up until the difference in length. I put a little red Sharpie on these to help point it out, but you know, you want this perfectly straight, this line. So this is reclamped down. I'm going to put a tack weld back on there and call the tank done. So let's weld it up. That looks pretty good to me. I got it all lined up. It's square to the frame. It's centered. That looks good. We're going to weld it up in this position and call it good to go. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is, well, let me tell you what the goal is today. The goal today is to get this bike off of the lift, wheels off, front end off, gas tank off, get all the doodads welded on the frame that need to be welded, because tomorrow morning this sumbitch has got to be on the way to the powder coat guy as soon as I could get it to him. So then you may ask, why am I going to fuck around with this wheel next? Well, because one of the checks that I do before I powder coat or paint anything is I get the rolling chassis off the lift and make sure the stance is what I want it to be. I mean, this was checked months and months ago, okay? But you know, when it's all together, you just want to make sure that it's what you want it to be, because you know, you powder coat it, it's too late then. You know, you're committed. Well, you're committed already, but at least you won't be wasting money on powder coat that's got to get redone in case something isn't quite right. But anyway, the last thing I want to do is get it off the stand, have it on its wheels, roll it around, and one of the checks I do is the kickstand check. I've seen a lot of guys build choppers, and the kickstand is too long, too short. You know, the bike is standing too straight up and it might fall over. The bike is leaning too far over to the left, it might fall over. So I like to check the kickstand, because if I've got to, you know, weld the kickstand tab or bend it or whatever, you know, it's nice to do it now instead of later. Plus, once you get the bike together and the engine's in there, the only access to the kickstand bolt is up from the bottom, and this thing's going to have about, I don't know, 5-6 inches of ground clearance, maybe. So it's awful difficult to work on the bottom of the motorcycle when the engine is in it. So we're going to get this wheel fitted up on here, and we're going to make sure that it rolls nice, the spacers are correct, and that when the bike is sitting on the ground on its wheels in a kickstand, everything is correct. And I've got here an old axle. Never been used. I don't remember where it came from, but I've got this old axle laying around. It's too long, so we're going to cut it off somewhere in here. I'm going to put it out on the lathe and cut some new threads in it, and this is what we're going to use for an axle. So I'm going to measure this up and go work on it. Okay, I got about a 1/4 inch hanging out on both sides, which is what I wanted. And I also wanted it so that the machined smooth part of the axle was riding on the springer. If the threaded ends were riding down in there, sooner or later they'd start sawing into that lower rocker and make the hole bigger than it needs to be. So that should be good. If by some chance this part that sticks out is too long, and when I tighten the nuts up they don't compress the lock washers, what I'm going to do is peel a couple of threads off the inside of this with a boring bar so that the nut could slide down over the threaded part of the axle. Actually, I was thinking that'd be the most desirable way to do it anyway. Let's see how I made out with the wheel. Let me check the centering. I locked the adjustable square down and haven't moved it. Perfect. All right, very happy with that. All right. One motorcycle sitting on the ground. Lean angle's not bad. Stance is not bad. Managed to get the frame level. I like it. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun bike.
Alright, here's the last thing I'm going to show you today. Here's this little triangle of metal I welded in here. I drilled a hole for the kickstart spring. Positive lock in the down position, that's what you want. Watch this. I welded a bumper on the frame. So when the kickstand comes up, and this one comes up with a great deal of authority, it's not going to mash up the frame. It'll hit this built-in stop for it. I like it. The frame is done. It's ready to go to powder coat. I was hoping to get a few of the other parts prepped today, but I didn't. I'll do that tomorrow morning. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. Anyway, for tonight, I am out of here. Hey, we'll see you tomorrow when I pick up where I left off over here. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. Bye.